Even when we're in conflict, when we're arguing with each other, conflict is always a bid for connection.
What happens when nervous systems actually see relationality as a threat?
Thinking of relationships where repair is genuinely possible, people are always just asking for help. People are always asking to be seen, to be witnessed, to be held, to be acknowledged. How much can this relationship really hold? How deep can we go? How do we come together in a way that the muscle fiber of our relationship will have the rupture that's needed? But it's in that kind of like right zone where it can stitch back together, where we can heal. I'm Meenadchi, and my definition of belonging is feeling at home in my own skin and emitting an energy that invites you to feel at home in yours.
Meenadchi, hello.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thanks.
It is an absolute honor to have you here. I am just blown away that I get to sit with you. You are a communication and wellness consultant. You're a somatic practitioner, and you wrote a book called Decolonizing Nonviolent Communication, which is incredible. You are also an occupational therapist. I didn't even know this about you.
All the fun facts.
Lately, you have been helping folks work on relationality, relationships, building connection, and specifically moving from rupture to repair, which is one of my favorite topics to talk about. And we'll be diving very deeply into that. Today, we're going to focus on how to do that as a leader.
Okay.
We're going to focus on the tools that are necessary for leaders to successfully move into accountability, to successfully give feedback, to successfully work with a team that struggles in different various forms. So I want to start with something that you say here, which I just love. You say relationships are our core resource. So say more about that, because I have so many thoughts that I want to kind of offer you.
First, I think we don't do anything alone. I think... Right? There's that, I think it's an African proverb that says, right, if you want to go fast, go by yourself. Well, I can't remember. Do you remember?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far,
go together.
Go together.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of beautiful work that we can do by ourselves and maybe should, quote, quote, do by ourselves or something. I also know that when I walk into a room, and your face lights up seeing me, which I know just from knowing you for 4 years, your face always lights up when it sees me. It gives me a particular feeling that helps me remember who I am. There's, for better or for worse, there's a beauty in the ways that our relationships help us see ourselves more fully, more richly, more deeply. And I think that I think this is true in all spaces, but I think also if we're putting a focus on like work settings, right? We do good work in places where we're wanted. We do good work in places where we feel celebrated and valued and seen. And so like when my virtual assistant and I get on to our Zoom calls with each other, our faces light up because we love seeing each other. And that makes everything else easier from there onward.
This is bringing up so much. Daniel Siegel defines that a relationship is to know and to be known, which is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah.
What happens when relationships are coded as unsafe? What happens when nervous systems actually see relationality as a threat?
Well, one, we find ways to cope. We find ways to manage. Two, we're always in relationship, even if it's not like we're ever out of relationship. We are always in relationship. It's just a question of like, what's the quality of relationship that we choose, and also within that context and quality, what's the style of relationship that gets us to the place that we want to be?
I love that so much. You say we first have to be aware and acknowledge that a rupture happened. This is when we are talking about conflict. Then we have to tune into ourselves and watch for defensiveness rising. Defensiveness, I love this so much, is the antithesis to connection.
Even when we're in conflict, when we're arguing with each other, conflict is always a bid for connection, right? We are only ever in, and it can be, some people have come to know conflict as connection, right? So it can be that some people, some nervous systems are only able to engage with each other in an antagonistic way. That's the only style.
Yeah.
But I think that if we're thinking of relationships where repair is genuinely possible, people are always just asking for help. People are always asking to be seen, to be witnessed, to be held, to be acknowledged. And I think that, are we allowed to swear?
Absolutely.
Okay. When we fuck up, right? It's hard because, and especially for those of us who don't want to fuck up, who don't want to cause impact, who don't want to cause harm, right? We're also holding like our own embarrassment, our own humiliation on top of the impact that we've caused. It's incredibly layered. And then it's normal for the human body in order to protect and preserve its energy to put walls up really quickly and to shut out and to shut down. And we can't be in a repair process if we're closed off.
What's the value of repair?
I always talk about everything from the context of like, what does the body have to tell us? Like the body is already a blueprint for like how to do things well, right?
Yeah.
So if you take a muscle fiber, right? Muscle fibers are stitched together. And then in order for a muscle to grow, right? The fibers have to actually tear. The fibers have to actually come apart. It's why it's called shredding when you're in the gym. And then the muscle fibers come back together, and that's what makes them functional. That's what makes them able to lift stronger, healthier, et cetera, right? So if I go to the gym, so right now my deadlift has been the same for such a long time. My deadlift is like 125 with the bar, right? But like, if I go in,
I just want to say, why is this my new life? Why is this topic following me everywhere now?
It's a good one.
My God.
Okay, so if I go into the gym and I'm like, I'm going to work this 1 pound weight, right? We're going to grow this bicep with this 1 pound weight. My bicep is not gonna, like my muscle is not gonna go anywhere. If I go in and I try and curl a 95-pound weight right now, right? That's gonna fuck me up, right? Because it's too much. It's more than I can functionally hold. I'm gonna need a lot of time and possibly external support like a cast or a sling or whatever, right? For the muscle to repair, for the muscle to come back online. But if I've been working at like my 125 deadlift and the next day I go in and I put a couple fives on each end, we work to 135 to 140, et cetera, right? The body becomes stronger. The body becomes more functional. We can lift that much more, especially if we have like a bottle of water lined up. We got our banana. It's our rest day. All of these things put together. And our relationships are the exact same. If we have zero rupture in a relationship, there's always going to be a question of how much can this relationship really hold? How deep can we go? How far can we go? How much can we navigate in the brainstorming process of disagreement? On the flip side, if the rupture is too big, we need a lot of time and we need a lot of interconnected, intentional community around us that will hold us during the repair process. So a lot of the skills that I teach and the things, the way I think about it is, how do we become each other's bottles of water? How do we become each other's bananas? How do we come together in a way that the muscle fiber of our relationship will have the rupture that's needed? But it's in that kind of like right zone where it can stitch back together, where we can heal, and then it can become that much stronger. We can lift that much more with each other, for each other, together.
If y'all are not following Meenadchi on LinkedIn, please do so now. These are so many incredible gems that they're dropping. Defensiveness. This is something that is ubiquitous in the workplace.
Yeah.
For sure. Clients go through performance evaluations. I am reading my evaluation from my boss and my peers, and I'm getting defensive. Why am I getting defensive?
Because we don't like being told that we're not good enough.
Yeah.
We don't like being told that something we're doing is bad or hard. And I think if we're not in a practice of giving feedback, right? Like if it's your first time hearing something, then it can be a shock to the nervous system. Any type of change is a shock to the nervous system. And I think that, again, one of the things my VA, Wait,
what's a VA?
A virtual assistant.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
She has been a stickler for feedback. She is always hungry for feedback. And it's put me in a practice of like constantly giving her feedback for better and for worse, which then makes it that when I have to give her critical feedback, which comes up,
of course,
right? It's not new. And it's not received as a reflection of who she is or her value in the space. It's just a fact. Like here are just some things that need to change. And so in any type of relationship, we have to be in a practice of telling each other, here's what you do that I find really helpful, right? Please keep doing this. Here's something that could be a little bit more helpful if you tweak or do it this way. And I think the other thing is that like a lot of times, especially in the workplace environment, right? We do a thing because we have this perspective or this angle on it. Somebody else has a different perspective or a different angle and maybe a different need. And then there can be a feeling of like, they didn't see what I was trying to do. They're not seeing the same thing. They're not seeing how important it was for me to do it this way. I wasn't doing it this way because I'm stupid. I'm doing it this way because from this lens, it was really important.
And being able to communicate that and sharing that level of clarity.
Yeah.
I want to go back to something you said about when my defensiveness loads up, then I'm probably also loading up shame and maybe even the need to deflect that shame. And I'll go into blame, for example. How do I even begin to notice that I have shame?
This is an interesting question because I don't know if I have an answer. I think I have answers after you've registered shame, what you can do. But go ahead, you got something to say.
So then what would my behavior tell me that I am in a shame spiral? What might my languaging be? What might my thoughts be about myself?
I think anytime we feel a pretty strong uptick of the inner critic, right? Like, and we all have them. I'm not good enough. I will never get it right. I mess up every time I try to do this. I should just give up, right? So tracking when there's an uptick in those voices. And interestingly enough, when there's an uptick of hypercriticism of anybody else, it's also an indication that shame might be present because we can only think about other people the ways that we think about ourselves. So it's only possible to be hypercritical of somebody else if we carry that hypercriticism within us. So if we're also going on he's so, she's so, yada, 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 right? All of those things. And if we're expanding it to not just the function of the job, right? Like not just like, I'm real frustrated that they don't seem to be able to send this email off. Like they never send emails consistently at the time that we need to get those emails out, into they're irresponsible, they're this, they're terrible, all these other kind of like broader paintings of who this person is as a human being. I think those also are indications that there's some shame stuff.
I love this so much. I'm a leader. I am doing a one-on-one with my direct report. My direct report comes in to share an update of a project cross-functionally. It is not going well for them. They're having a tough time out in the field working with the different teams. And they are coming with hypercritical blame from a cross-functional lens. as the leader sitting in that one-on-one, what do I do?
So one, I think my answer is going to depend a little bit on like, there's different styles of leaders, different types of relationships, right? Number one, validate to the extent that is normal, functional, healthy, helpful. Validate without going into
colluding.
Yes, without going into enemy image, without painting the other person, right? The enemy image. Are so good. That is not me. That is a core concept of nonviolent communication, which is a lot of the foundation of what my work comes from, right?
Got it.
So one of the core principles of nonviolent communication is that everybody is moving from an underlying need. They're trying to get a need met. And then we experience conflict when the ways that we're getting our needs met don't work. Odds. Are at odds, right?
But define what a need is so that our audience...
A need is like a need is not necessarily a tangible thing. So for example, hunger is a need, right? And then you eat a sandwich or you eat a dosa or whatever to meet your needs for hunger, right? And we also have needs for respect, right? We have needs for respect, dignity, care, appreciation, etc.
I'm loving the fact that you said dosa, right? You're decolonizing. You're decolonizing as you speak.
And trying to decolonize my own because I don't normally eat sandwiches.
Right. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah. So the need is like, what is the thing that actually, bottom line, that actually matters? And then understanding that we can have different ways of getting the needs met. Some people really value punctuality, right? For when people are punctual, it really like, oh, that person respects me, right? Or like when a person communicates like, hey, I'm not going to be on time, but I know that this is the time we agreed to meet, right? For a lot of people, it meets a really sweet spot. It feels really good. Other people don't care. They're like, roll in whenever you get here. I'm good, right?
Yeah, totally.
It's like, so we can have our needs met in different ways. But coming back to this concept of enemy image, if we move from the understanding that people are just trying to get their needs met, and it's not a need to hurt me. They have something going on that has nothing to do with me. It's about them, right? And maybe whatever they're doing doesn't work for me. I don't like it, but it's not actually about me. And so if we can enemy image is when you start painting that other person as a horrible human being who just doesn't know how to collaborate. And as this kind of leader who's wanting to support your direct report without going into, because that feeding into that colluding and that enemy image is not actually going to make the collaboration stronger. We have to maintain human connection in order to be able to do good work. And so it's a matter of grounding each other into what actually matters and then identifying what can we tangibly, functionally do to move the needle in a way that works.
That's fantastic. I'm always in relationship, but I'm not always in connection.
Yeah, fair.
Explain to me what being in relationship but not in connection looks like.
Yeah. When you say the word connection, what I think of is resonance. And also something that's been following you. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm laughing because you and I studied with Sarah Payton, and how we actually met was in a webinar. Yeah. I think you commented.
I did. I said you had Rajkumari had just done this amazing. You had done this presentation. It was amazing, and I was like, "That's sexy AF." And I'm like, the room stood still. People were like.
That's true. You did. I was like stunned. I was like, oh.
Yeah. I love that activity, by the way. I still use it. I have no idea. What was it? It was the paper activity. And I use it in a different way than what you use it.
Paper activity?
Yeah. You had like 9 pieces of paper that you put on the ground.
We did the squad.
And then you stand on it and you feel things and it's magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, humans are magic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
But also you are magic.
Well, that's very sweet. So when I am in relationship and not feeling connected, and you're defining connection as resonance, which you're going to have to define for the audience.
Yeah, for sure. I think of resonance and empathy as the same thing. I think I'm going to break down a difference. People kind of have this impression of empathy as like, I'm feeling what you're feeling. And I don't think of that as empathy. I think of that as bad boundaries. It is. No, thank you. Rajkumari.
Oh God, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I've never heard that like that.
I don't want to feel what you're feeling and I think there's a lot of people, we have different nervous systems. Like the world is not designed for people with sensitive nervous systems. So then you're not trained how to set your boundaries. And there's a lot of reasons why we have boundaries.
Oh shit, I'm having a huge epiphany right now.
Okay.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So given my childhood and having to intuit the room constantly.
Yeah.
There's an enmeshing.
Yeah.
That happens. There's a merging.
Yeah.
That happens with people in the room so that I can constantly gauge my own safety.
Yeah.
And I think I have misinterpreted that to be empathy when it's really just energetic hypervigilance.
Yeah.
And it's not as bound. That's really helpful, Meenadchi. Thank you.
I'm glad.
I love that.
Yeah. Cool. So I think of empathy as like when you're trying to catch a signal on like on a radio, like when you're like tuning it, right? And you can hear the track. You're like, oh, it's a good track. Like, and you're weeding through the fuzz. And so our ability to kind of like catch and ride that wave with each other, which I think is the same as resonance. Like when we're able to ride a certain wave, when we feel like we're together in this, is I think a lot of times when it's easy to get stuff done together. And yes, it's actually not always easy to find that sense of connection and resonance with everybody.
So the opposite of connection would be?
I'm not sure. I don't know if it's disconnection. Do you know?
For me, it would be distance.
Oh.
It would be a distant, I'm not able to reach you. I'm not able to find, because I could be trying, I could be in relationality with you, attempting to build resonance and not actually succeeding.
Yeah.
So I might feel resonant with me trying.
Yeah.
And I might be having the experience of caring.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that I'm successfully resonating. And so that might leave me feeling a sense of longing, a sense of disappointment in myself.
Yeah.
Maybe even starting to not trust you because I really put the effort out to connect and do that bid for connection.
Yeah.
And it's not landing. And so I don't know how to find you.
Yeah.
So for me, it would be distance.
Can I share my thought?
Yeah, please.
This is what you have just shared is an incredibly self-aware response. Like it's incredibly because you're tracking for yourself what's happening for you, and you're tracking the way it feels to be in space with somebody that you're not able to connect with. And I don't know that most folks have that experience or skill of tracking.
It's called trauma.
Yeah. And I know that for my own self, I think for me, the opposite of connection might be an actual turning away from, which is different from distance. Distance can be, I just can't find you. I feel you over there, but I can't find you.
Exactly.
Which is very different from turning away from.
100%.
And not looking toward and not being interested.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that might be a protection.
I think we always have choice. And this is something that I actually learned from Mickey Kashtan, who's another, right? Sometimes the consequences are dire, but it's important to remember that we actually are always making a choice. And I feel like that's important for me in my practice, because having a sense of choice is the anchor for nonviolence. Having a sense of choice is the anchor for authenticity. If I tell myself the story,
whoa,
okay, Yomika, slow down.
That's incredible. Choice is the anchor for authenticity.
I think so.
Wow. Please continue.
If I tell myself the story that I don't have a choice about how I show up in this environment, then I'm putting a limitation on myself. Versus if I say I have a choice on how I show up in this environment, and the choice that I'm about to make where I maybe mask or hide a little bit is strategically the choice I'm going to make right now, because that's what helps me feel safe. then I can move into that. And then when I leave that environment, I can unmask, I can code switch, I can do whatever. But if I consistently tell myself the story, the world doesn't want me for who I am, it does something different to the body. It trains the body to believe that we're not wanted and that we're not welcome. And I'm not here for that. And I really try and work with my clients to see that good things are genuinely possible. That so many good things are possible if we allow ourselves to tap into the belief that they are.
Talk a little bit about the story that you shared with me in our pre-talk.
Oh gosh. Whew,
and talk about that choice. Because I think that example is so perfect when we talk about reorgs or layoffs or a numerous amount of things that, people are like, we're doing a reorg and this is your new job. And if you don't want it, you don't have to take it.
Yeah.
Is that really a choice?
Mm-hmm. So I'll share two things. So the first is a buddy of mine, Nakia Winfield, who's a brilliant, just racial justice educator, strategist, all these things. She was talking about the ways in which consent is or is not present in the workplace. And I've forgotten the name of the company, but there was a company in Asheville that did not allow its employees to leave.
This is just in the recent few days ago with the hurricane.
Yeah. And by the time middle management said, okay, you can leave, it was too late. And several people died trying to evacuate. And when my buddy was kind of like telling me about this and sharing her thoughts on it, she was like, those people didn't have a choice. It's a yes and, because yes, they didn't have a choice in the sense of like, when your brain is full of worry of how am I going to support my family, I'm not going to leave. But I think also for many of the spaces where we're in, where we are craving some kind of radical change, we have to believe that we have a choice. We have to believe that I can walk out of this environment, that we can organize together, and that we can build something new. So this is the nuance of choice. And I think that, like I was recently doing a training, and it's a hierarchical situation. And the leader of the space asked me, like, well, if when we have conflict here, can I just like trust that people are going to rely on, we can lean on our values, you know what I mean, to resolve this conflict? I said, no. If you know that all of your employees, 150% want to be working here, that they'd be working if they were just getting like peanuts, yes, you can lean on your values. But if capitalism is forcing them, is in any way providing kind of like what's the word? It starts with a C, coercive. If it's coercing them to be there, then you're going to have power dynamics. Then people who are new to the organization are not going to want to speak up against people who are older to the organization. They're not going to want to speak up against people who maybe have a closer relationship with you as the head of the organization, because they're in a condition where it's hard to find a job. Maybe there are identity factors for them that make it not so possible. This is the best job that they can get, right? So then you cannot, I think it's this nuance of like choice is always possible, but as a leader, you have to constantly be assessing how much choice, regardless of how much choice there actually is, how much choice do my people feel in the space, and how much choice do they sense that they have? Because that's going to inform what we share and how we share.
How do I, as a leader, even begin to ask that question?
One, I think you as a leader have to understand the power dynamics, which means that you as a leader have to be doing your, listen, I wish, are you familiar with Deepa Iyer's work?
No.
I talk about her all the time. I'm like such a fangirl. She has this one, pictograph. There's a word for it. I can't remember. Yeah. But of all the different roles that we have in kind of like social and organizational change. And I think in the same way, there are different types of leaders, right? There are visionary leaders. There's the leaders who say, see this, that, whatever. In order to do this kind of leadership, you have to be the type of leader who understands people. Not every leader understands people. Some leaders understand the vision. They know how to map future. They know how to build collaborations. That's different from understanding how to hold and cultivate the people who are, lower down the ladder or whatever, but still who are the people who are actually holding the company in place, which means you have to be a student of psychology. You have to be a student of trauma to understand how trauma is showing up in the workplace. You have to be a student of like racism and sexism and transphobia, all these things.
Why?
Because they show up, because unless you're running like an all white space with just white men, if you're running spaces with people who look like us, people are carrying different things into the space, and it impacts the way we collaborate. It impacts the way we use our voice. And as this type of leader, it is your job to get people's voices into the space, because if you are hiring well, you are hiring people who will do really good things for your company. And so then you want to build a space where they can really pour and contribute and like bring beauty to the surface.
That's stunning. I teach a class called From Conflict to Connection, and we did module 1 this week. And in module 1, we talk about the DMN, the default mode network.
Okay.
And our activity midway through the module is for folks to write down their self-critical sentences.
Yeah.
And then it's to get into pairs and figure out what a self-supportive sentence would be as an antithesis to that self-critical sentence. Listening to you, what's coming up for me is all of these self-critical sentences that I carry, that you carry, that everyone carries. It's our diversity because it elucidates who I am, the scaffolding of my identity, and the fissures of where that exists in that scaffolding. And if I am a leader who wants to uphold resonance and empathy and ways of relating, then I can start to scan for the places of my people that are unique in their self-criticism, so I can come into a place of self-supporting.
I think this is beautiful. And I feel like maybe I've had different experiences, but I've had different experiences from a different lens. I feel like the experience that I have had, and I think, so I've had the blessing of working with people across the socioeconomic spectrum. And what it's taught me is that those inner voices, those inner criticisms are the same.
Yeah.
And then they can show up in, do you know what?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I hear them across the spectrum of like race, socioeconomic status, gender identity. I hear the same inner critics everywhere. And that's actually what taught me that white supremacy doesn't work for anyone. That all these systems of oppression actually fuck us all over. Externally, it can look like some people are doing better than others. And in many ways, right, like those who have more access to like systems of privilege, et cetera, are functionally doing better and can get more access to resources. But I've been inside the brains. I've been with people who are very much at that nexus of power, and the shit that happens in there.
It's kind of incredible, isn't it?
It's intense.
It's remarkable.
Yeah.
It's remarkable.
Yeah.
No one escapes it.
Yeah.
No one escapes it. Talk about how, as a leader, I hold the other person's internal rupture.
Ooh, when you say internal rupture, what does that mean?
Let's say that I am sacrificing my authenticity to conform to what's happening in the moment because of job security.
Yeah.
And so I'm causing a break within me. And I'm going against my own values for all the right reasons.
Yeah.
I have a family to feed. I need to make sure that I pay my mortgage.
Yeah.
And I need to get my kids to school on time. Is there a way for me as a leader to support that at all?
I think you have to be honest because it's not just in the relationship that is maybe like right there, but company wide, right? What is the genuine expansiveness of the ecosystem? Is it actually possible for that person to show up in their fullness? And if it is not genuinely possible, then it is rather a betrayal to encourage them to come out of their shell more. It has more to do with, if you are in leadership and have power to shift the culture at work, how are you leveraging those conversations to bring change into the workplace? It's a little heavy to ask somebody to show up authentically if they're not going to be received with warmth.
Yeah. 100%. The ways in which people pleasing happens in the workplace, the ways in which fawning happens in the workplace, the ways in which accommodating, the ways in which taking on so much in terms of projects and filling the plate and just not having enough bandwidth.
Yeah.
What can we start to do about that?
Oof. Practice saying no. I think it's
right.
I think it's so important, because I think that the more overloaded we are, and I think a lot of people know this. It's interesting. There's the things we know theoretically, there's the things we know in our body, and then there's the point where things connect. If we chronically overload our plate, eventually we're going to burn out. Eventually we're going to drop the ball. Eventually resentment is going to create a crack in our working relationships. It is not sustainable. I had a mentor say to me once, self-care is an ethical responsibility.
Wow.
And I was not a person at that time who would necessarily engage with self-care from a sort of like personal lens, you know? But when he put it like that, and I was able to connect the dots, that in order to show up fully for my clients, I have to be well. So it's an ethical responsibility. I think the same is true here, that like not people pleasing in a workplace environment is an ethical responsibility for the team.
Wow.
Because if you are chronically overextending yourself, at some point, there's going to be a crack in team dynamics. And I think in some of what I've seen, again, because a lot of times people are moving into leadership positions, not because they're necessarily skilled at people management, but because that's just the next step, right? So if you are a leader, you also have to model, right, what you want your people to be doing. And if you are a leader who has stepped into leadership without addressing your people-pleasing dynamics, it's going to get real messy real fast, because you're going to be doing things for your staff that your staff should be doing. You're going to be afraid to give honest and authentic feedback that can actually then, if you just gave the feedback well, it could create some real team cohesion and team shift. But because you're afraid of it, you don't give it, and then things keep rippling and not people pleasing is an ethical responsibility.
My goodness. If I can't say no for a variety of different reasons, how do I learn to give myself permission to say no?
Oh. So I think my brain here goes to just some simple somatic activities. So first, if the idea of saying no scares you, just try saying it. Like not in a conversation. Not
like right now.
Yeah, just like right now, along with us, right?
Ready? 1, 2, 3. No.
Just say no. Just practice saying it and notice the bodily reactions that you have. And then start saying it in different goofy ways so that the word itself doesn't become quite so scary, right? Then you start saying no in like low stakes settings. Like somebody asks you for a cup of water and you say, no, actually, I'm going to keep working, and just notice that the world doesn't end. Like somebody can get up and get their cup of water. It's going to be okay. And eventually you will move to a place where you feel confident and comfortable saying no in the places that matter. And also remember what you're saying yes to. Like that, I think, can really help people shift, that whenever we say no to one thing, we're saying yes to something else.
I love that.
So if we really anchor and root into like, what am I saying yes to? It helps.
And I would say, I would even invite, where are the places that are scary to say yes?
Yeah.
Saying yes to rest.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
saying yes to naps.
Yeah.
Saying yes to walking.
Yes.
After work. Saying yes to tea.
Saying yes to do not disturb.
Saying yes to do not. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where are the yeses that need to happen? That happen for you?
Yeah.
As a well-being. You talked about somatic healing. What is the role of the body in all of this?
Oh. A lot of my work is helping people say what they want to say in the way that they want to say it. Right. And 9 times out of 10, I would say the reason we say things in like weird, whatever ways is because our body is constricted. We're like tight, we're tense, we're afraid.
Yeah.
So if we can listen to the body and be like, baby, everything is going to be okay. And also listening, because the body will also tell us what it is that actually matters. One of my favorite books, Gavin de Becker, The Gift of Fear. Do you not know it?
No.
It's amazing. So he talks about how things that often get labeled as intuition is actually the body picking up on subconscious environmental cues that are giving us information about something, right? So anytime we're in a hard conversation, we're always picking up cues from the other person, their body language, their behavior, the way they walked into the door. We're picking up on things. So the body will tell us, what is it that really matters to me? And also, how responsive is this other person going to be to what I have to say? Our body will pick those things up before our words or our brains do. So if we can listen to the body sooner, then we can translate the information that the body is giving us into words that will actually be effective in the conversation that we're about to have.
Gosh, this wants, I want to ask, where are we being deceived then?
Oh.
If I'm picking up cues, that's not intuition. How do I know? How do I begin to learn the difference between environmental cues that my body is picking up? I mean, what is the difference between that and intuition?
What's coming up is what I'm hearing is like, what's intuition? Just gut sense feeling, right?
Yeah.
What am I picking up from the environment? What information is my body gathering? And also, this wasn't spoken out loud, but also like, how do I track the difference between those two things and also what I'm projecting? Like where past conversations and baggage and et cetera is coming in and filtering.
100, like confirmation bias.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100. Great. So you just complicated your own question. Awesome. You get to answer it.
With practice, it's not that complicated, and it's incredibly complicated. It's with practice, and I think also with resonance, with having somebody with us who we trust, ideally, who can help point out the way you're saying that is a little skewed, or I think you're right on the money, like your gut sense, your intuition, etc.
Or even just saying out loud, "Ouch!"
Yeah.
Right. That seemed a little prickly.
Yeah.
And how to turn toward that. And that is so interesting. I really, really like that. You say everyone has had challenges with belonging, but there's a difference between leaders who are connected in a heal way to those challenges. Talk more about that.
I think that leaders set the tone for how anything is going to go, right? Not to be condescending, but it's a little bit like the head of a family, right? My Appa, God bless him, has a lot of challenges with belonging and with being seen, with being valued, right? And he projected a lot of his shit onto the family and made it hard for us to function genuinely as a unit together. And when a leader hasn't done their own inner work, there's a higher likelihood that they're going to take their shit out on their staff, as opposed to a leader who can check some of their own gunk and be like, I see you, hang out over here. I'm going to hold space for my people.
I love that. That's why I think, it's so important to continue to practice self-awareness, because self-awareness allows us to make higher quality decisions in high friction situations.
I love that. Look at you. You are the gem dropper. You. Yes.
Right?
Higher quality decisions in high friction situations. I love that.
And I think that's what we're having to contend with as leaders every damn day.
Yeah.
Every damn day.
Yeah.
I want to go to this stat, which I think is really interesting. According to the Gottman Institute, relationships where couples make consistent repair attempts, like offering empathy or resonance, actively listening or acknowledging mistakes, accountability, are more likely to succeed. And by succeed, what we're talking about is successful repair attempts are one of the strongest predictors of relationship success. How do we apply that in the workplace?
I think that what's behind that, the words that I'd put to that, is that there's a consistent desire to see the good in someone. There's you can only attempt repair if there's a desire to see that other person as someone who's worth being in relationship with. And I think that workplace or not, like, that is how relationships function. And I think that in the workplace, for various reasons, people can burn out a little bit more quickly. They turn away from each other. And then that has its effect in terms of the way teams fracture and people are no longer able to be in healthy collaboration.
Speaking of fracture, the United States is in a fractured state politically. How do we navigate opposing viewpoints? How do we navigate polarization? And figure out ways to maintain collaboration, communication, and connection?
I think this is an incredibly tender topic. And again, it comes back to the components around choice and capacity. In my work, I don't actually ever tell anybody that you have to see the good in somebody. If that is a value that you hold, I will help you to do that. But I won't tell you this is the value that you must hold and this is how you must move, because I think that we're all coming from such different histories. And I am just thinking of so many people who just functionally have a hard time surviving and just being well in the world, that it feels like an additional layer of torture to say you have to connect with this person whose politics are dehumanizing to you. That's not within the scope of practice for me. I will never tell anybody to do that. And if you are in an environment that is politically dehumanizing, then my counsel is always going to be find ways to resource yourself outside of the space so that you can continue functioning in the space in the ways that you need to. For folks who want to build collaboration and maintain relationship across difference in these ways, look for the goofy shit. Like, look, right? Like, look for the ways that you both like do or don't like Swiss cheese. Find ways to stay connected as human beings. Again, I've seen just these kind of like different interviews with different people across the political spectrum. And what's often the case is people actually want the same thing, right? It's the core component of conflict.
Often than not.
They want the same thing. We just have different ways of getting there. And so then it's a question of how deeply can we move into relationship with each other and be in conversation to find our way forward together. But again, I think that takes a lot of capacity and time to build those relationships.
We are always in relationship. Some of us build relationship through punitive means, and others build relationship through caring and resonance. So I think that's what the polarization piece is. Talk a little bit about nonviolent communication and what decolonizing it means. is.
Yeah. I love nonviolent communication. So the framework was developed by Marshall Rosenberg, who just put some really lovely things together. It's like a sort of structured modality for how do we communicate with each other. And it's great because it takes us, the point is to move out of shame and blame and like actually how do we move into resonance and collaboration with each other. And the initial framework has some problems. So when I talk about decolonizing nonviolent communication, I'm talking about decolonizing the framework itself that Rosenberg developed. So some of the changes are, one, the acknowledgement of power and privilege and understanding how that shapes dynamics in a conversation. Two, it has to do with listening to the body. And like really, again, just like if I ask someone to do something, right? Are they saying yes because I'm their boss, or do they feel safe saying no to me? And if I pick up on a vibe that they are people pleasing, then there's some work to do. But that also, again, is like a little bit of a felt sense. Like you can, and I don't know if this is, I'm going to go off into my different tangents because I don't know if this is true. I don't know that it's true for like the neurodiverse community, right? Like I pick up on things in a particular way. But it is a question of really being able to listen to what's true in the space. And then coming back to this sense of choice, right? Like in conventional NVC, it always ends with like, would you be willing to do yada, 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 right? And that works for some folks. Other folks are like, stop talking to me like a weird white therapist. Like, I'm not here for that. And so for me, when I teach people, it's like, how natural can we make your language? Two, something to consider is, are you communicating to express yourself, in which case you can say whatever you want to say? Or are you communicating because you actually need the other person to hear you, in which case you then become responsible for speaking your words in a way that they can actually hear and understand? And so then the next step to that question is, how do I speak in a way that you can hear me? And how do I do that where I still sound like me and I don't feel like I'm like sacrificing my dignity? I don't feel like I'm bending over backwards, but I just feel like I'm saying what's true in order to be in conversation with you. So those are some of the pieces.
I love that so much. Where does the burden of the oppressed fall into all of this?
Oh, I talk about it as reclamation. We get to reclaim our sense of choice. We get to reclaim connection with our body. We get to reclaim access to belonging. We get to reclaim access to taking up space. So my name is Meenadchi. I'm named after an incarnation of the mother goddess and was raised as a Hindu. So something that is like a very core principle to me is that we are part of each other in every atomic structural way.
Yeah.
So really, like, even my oppressor is a part of me. Yeah. And so how do I hold space for some of these realities?
I don't want this conversation to end. I am enjoying it so, so much. In my closing question to you, what is your hope around where we as a collective arrive in terms of decolonizing our languages?
Oh, I'm going to share, are you familiar with Howard Thurman?
No, but are you getting emotional right now?
I'm getting happy.
You're getting happy. Okay, great. Okay, awesome.
Howard Thurman was one of Dr. King's mentors. And he said, do not ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. So my hope is that we find ways to use words in ways that make us come alive. That we find ways to use words in ways that help us feel like we belong. And again, that help us feel like we belong without sacrificing any one of our needs, without sacrificing play or laughter or dignity or care, that we just, do good things with our words.
That's stunning. Where I take that is, how can leaders start to show up in meetings that really prioritize coming alive for everybody, no matter what the project is.
Which I think might be woo-woo for some, but it'll be right on the money for others.
Meenadchi, thank you so much for taking the time to come to the studio.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks for coming in person. It's really good to meet you.
Yeah.
Thank you.